October 16, 1946, Nuremberg, Germany, 1:11 in the morning. Inside a prison gymnasium, a 64-year-old man walks steadily toward a wooden gallows. He has asked to die like a soldier by firing squad. That request was denied. Instead, he will hang. And what happens next will last not seconds, but 24 agonizing minutes. This is the story of Wilhelm Keitel, Hitler's most obedient field marshal, the man who signed Germany's unconditional surrender, and the man who paid for his obedience with one of the most painful executions in the history of the Nuremberg trials. The 1st of October, 1946, Nuremberg, Germany. After more than 10 months of trial, 21 defendants, among the most powerful political, military and economic figures of Nazi Germany, finally heard their sentences read aloud. These were not ordinary criminals. These were the architects of a regime that had plunged the entire world into war, enslaved entire nations, and industrialized mass murder on a scale never seen before in human history. The International Military Tribunal, formed by the Allied powers, had gathered in Nuremberg specifically to hold these men accountable, to make clear to the world that no rank, no title, and no claim of following orders could shield a man from responsibility for crimes against humanity. 12 of the 21 defendants were sentenced to death by hanging. One of them was German Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel. Wilhelm Keitel was born on the 22nd of September, 1882, in the small village of Helmscherode, then part of the German Empire. He was only 6 years old when his mother died of childbed fever in 1889, following the birth of his younger brother Baudouin, who would later become an infantry general. His father was a landowner, and for a time Wilhelm expected to inherit and manage the family estates. However, his father showed no intention of retiring, and with the land unavailable to him, Wilhelm made a decision that would change the course of his life entirely. In 1901, he joined the Prussian army as an artillery officer. In April 1909, Wilhelm Keitel married Lisa Fontaine, the daughter of a wealthy landowner. Her family also owned the Wilful Brewery, which was at that time temporarily the largest cooperative brewery in Europe. It was more than a practical arrangement. By all accounts, it was a genuine partnership. Lisa wanted the life of an officer's wife, and that desire would later play a quiet but significant role in keeping Wilhelm in uniform even when other paths were available to him. Together, they had 6 children, though one died young. The First World War began on the 28th of July 1914. Keitel served on the Western Front, first as a battery commander and then as a staff officer. In 1914, fighting in Flanders, he was seriously wounded by a shrapnel grenade. During his recovery, his organizational abilities became impossible to overlook, and from the spring of 1915, he was transferred to the Army General Staff, a role far better suited to his true talents. He was not a battlefield commander by nature. He was an administrator, a planner, a man who understood how large military machines were built and maintained. The First World War ended on the 11th of November 1918, when German leaders signed the armistice in the Compiègne forest in France. The war had claimed the lives of 10 million soldiers and left property and industry across Europe in ruins. The victorious Allied powers responded by imposing a series of devastating treaties on the defeated nations. The 1919 Treaty of Versailles held Germany solely responsible for starting the war and liable for massive reparations. Germany lost 13% of its pre-war territory, the Rhineland was demilitarized, and the German army, the Reichswehr, was restricted to just 100,000 men. In the new Weimar Republic, which governed Germany from 1918 to 1933, Keitel was retained in the newly restructured military and played an active role in organizing the paramilitary Freikorps units. These were largely World War I veterans, bitter, restless, and deeply hostile to the republic they were ostensibly defending. Many were involved in political assassinations. The seeds of what was coming were already being planted. In 1924, Keitel was transferred to the Ministry of the Reichswehr in Berlin, where he served in the Truppenamt, an agency that existed specifically to conceal the banned German Army General Staff from international observation. After the death of his father, the question of returning to farm life arose once again. But Lisa had no desire to leave the world of an officer's household, and Keitel himself could see that promotion was within reach. He stayed in uniform, and in doing so, he became one of the central figures in Germany's secret rearmament program, covertly planning, reorganizing, and expanding the German military in direct and deliberate violation of the Treaty of Versailles. Rearmament was hidden behind glider clubs training future pilots, sporting associations teaching combat techniques, and SA militia groups conducting infantry drills. The deception was systematic and total. When Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came to power in January 1933, this covert rearmament exploded openly and massively. In Nazi Germany, all authority was centralized in Hitler's person. His word was the highest law, and the men around him competed to serve that word most completely. Wilhelm Keitel became Hitler's most loyal and compliant military officer, so thoroughly obedient that his peers began calling him, behind his back, a blindingly loyal toady. In 1935, Keitel was appointed head of the Armed Forces Office at the Reich Ministry of War, overseeing the Army, Navy, and Air Force simultaneously. Then, in 1938, when the Ministry of War itself was abolished and replaced by the German Armed Forces High Command, Keitel was placed at its head with the rank of Reich Minister, making him on paper the second most powerful figure in the entire German military hierarchy, answerable only to Hitler himself. This surprised everyone, including Keitel. His peers did not respect him. They considered him a sycophant, frequently bypassed him, and went directly to Hitler with their requests. Hitler, for his part, did not choose Keitel for his intellect or strategic vision. He openly acknowledged Keitel's limitations. What Hitler valued was simpler and more useful. Keitel was, as Hitler once said, as loyal as a dog. He was diligent, obedient, and he never pushed back. In early 1938, Austrian Chancellor Kurt Schuschnigg announced a referendum on whether Austria should remain independent or unite with Germany. Hitler saw this as a threat to his plans and ordered Keitel to conduct military exercises near the Austrian border, not an invasion, but a demonstration of force, a visible threat designed to break Schuschnigg's resolve. It worked. Schuschnigg resigned on the 11th of March. The following day, German troops entered Austria without resistance. One day later, Austria was formally incorporated into Germany in what became known as the Anschluss, the Nazi regime's first act of territorial aggression. Thousands turned out to greet Hitler in the streets. For his role in the operation, Wilhelm Keitel was awarded the Anschluss Medal. World War II began on the 1st of September 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. Keitel was deeply involved in planning the invasion from the very beginning, and he was fully aware of its criminal dimensions. Mass arrests, population transfers, and mass murders had been planned long before the first German soldier crossed the Polish border. On the 7th of September, Reinhard Heydrich declared that all Polish nobles, clergy, and Jews were to be killed. On the 12th of September, Keitel personally added Poland's intelligentsia to that list, its scientists, teachers, lawyers, doctors, and military officers. In the months that followed, approximately 60,000 such individuals were systematically executed across Poland in what became known as the intelligentsia action. When officers under his command began raising complaints about the atrocities they were witnessing, Keitel ignored them, deliberately, consistently, until those men became too morally numbed to protest any further. For his loyalty during the Polish campaign, Hitler rewarded Keitel with a personal bonus of 100,000 Reichsmarks. The German invasion of France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands began on the 10th of May, 1940. Within 6 weeks, France had fallen. Hitler, determined to extract maximum symbolic humiliation from the moment, ordered the armistice to be signed in the exact same railway car in which Germany had signed its own surrender at the end of World War I, removed from the museum where it had been preserved and transported back to the Compiègne forest. On the 22nd of June 1940, General Keitel signed the armistice for Germany. General Hunzinger signed for France. Keitel, flushed with victory, publicly called Hitler the greatest warlord of all time. Shortly after, he was promoted to the rank of Field Marshal. The promotion did nothing to improve how his colleagues regarded him. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, summarized the general view in a single sentence. Keitel had a sergeant's mind inside a field marshal's body. From April 1941 onward, Keitel issued and personally signed a series of orders that crossed every boundary of international law and basic human decency. He authorized the execution of Jews, civilians, and non-combatants for any reason whatsoever. He exempted the soldiers carrying out these murders from any risk of court-martial or future prosecution. He issued directives demanding unusual severity on the Eastern Front, specifying that the death of a single German soldier justified the execution of 50 to 100 so-called communists. He signed the Commando Order, which authorized the killing of captured Allied Special Forces soldiers, even those who surrendered in full uniform. And he drafted the Night and Fog Decree, which allowed German occupation authorities to abduct suspected resistance members in the middle of the night, making them disappear without a trace. Friends and family were told nothing, not even whether their loved ones were alive. Approximately 7,000 people were arrested under this decree. Those who survived interrogation and torture were sent to concentration camps, including Gross Rosen and Natzweiler Struthof. The decree's purpose was simple: to break the will of occupied populations by destroying hope itself. The war had become deeply personal for Keitel as well. In July 1941, his youngest son Hans-Georg was killed during the German assault on the Soviet Union, the same invasion Keitel had helped plan and launch. Near the end of the war, his eldest son Karl-Heinz was taken prisoner by the Russians. On the 20th of July 1944, Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg and a group of conspirators placed a bomb inside Hitler's conference room. It exploded. Hitler survived. Keitel personally helped lead the injured Führer out of the room. In the brutal crackdown that followed, over 7,000 people were arrested and nearly 5,000 were executed. Keitel sat on the Army Court of Honor that handed implicated officers over to the People's Tribunal for show trials. Among those implicated was Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the legendary Desert Fox. On Hitler's orders, Keitel sent 2 generals to Rommel's home with an ultimatum: stand trial or take your own life. To protect his family from Nazi reprisals, Rommel swallowed a cyanide pill. He was given a state funeral. The official story was that he had died of wounds from his staff car being strafed in Normandy. Keitel knew the truth. He had delivered the message that ended Rommel's life. Adolf Hitler committed suicide on April 30th, 1945. On May 7th, Alfred Jodl signed Germany's unconditional surrender in Reims. Within hours, the Soviet High Command rejected it, partly out of fear that a future generation would use it to revive the stab-in-the-back myth, the dangerous lie from World War I that Germany had been betrayed rather than defeated. The Soviets demanded the supreme commander of all German forces sign the document himself in Berlin. That man was Wilhelm Keitel. On the night of May 8, 1945, he signed the definitive German instrument of surrender, the legal end of World War II in Europe. The man who had helped build Hitler's war machine had now officially and personally dismantled it. He was arrested shortly after. At Nuremberg, Keitel was charged on 4 counts: conspiracy to commit crimes against peace, planning and waging wars of aggression, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Throughout the trial, he admitted knowing that many of Hitler's orders were illegal, but insisted he had followed them because he had no choice. He described the atrocities as having developed step by step without foreknowledge of the consequences. The tribunal was not moved. Prison psychiatrist G.M. Gilbert, who interviewed all the major defendants extensively, delivered his assessment of Keitel with clinical precision. He had no more backbone than a jellyfish. On October 1st, 1946, the International Military Tribunal found Wilhelm Keitel guilty on all 4 counts and sentenced him to death by hanging. His formal request for a firing squad, a soldier's death, was denied. The tribunal was explicit. His crimes were not military, they were criminal. Here is a fact that most history books bury quietly. The man assigned to execute Wilhelm Keitel and 9 other Nazi war criminals that night had never legally hanged anyone in his life. American Army Master Sergeant John C. Woods volunteered for the role in 1944, claiming he had hanged men in Texas and Oklahoma. The U.S. Army never verified this claim. If they had, they would have discovered immediately that both Texas and Oklahoma had switched to electrocution years before Woods claimed to have worked there. The last hanging in Texas took place in 1923, when Woods was 12 years old. Between 1944 and 1946, Woods participated in at least 11 documented bungled hangings of American soldiers, 11 before he was handed the Nuremberg assignment. So the question that hangs over that gymnasium on October 16, 1946, is simple and deeply uncomfortable. Was what happened to Keitel and the others that night an accident of incompetence, or was it something else? According to Lieutenant Stanley Tills, who coordinated the Nuremberg hangings, Woods had deliberately placed the noose coils off-center on Julius Streicher to ensure he would not die quickly. Reporter Howard K. Smith, present that night, wrote that after Streicher's initial drop failed to kill him, Woods came down from the platform. He disappeared behind the curtain concealing the dying man, and the groaning abruptly stopped. Smith and every other witness in that room believed Woods had grabbed Streicher and strangled him manually with the rope. Photographs of the bodies taken that night showed battered and bloody faces on multiple executed men, including Keitel, consistent with the trapdoors being too small and striking the men's heads as they fell. The U.S. Army officially denied any wrongdoing. After the executions, Woods gave newspaper interviews. He said he never saw a hanging go off any better. He said it was an assignment he really wanted to do. He described the men as arrogant criminals who really deserved hanging. A small smile, witnesses noted, crossed his lips as he pulled the handle. Was this justice, or did it cross a line? A journalist cannot ignore that question. The men who died in that gymnasium had committed some of the worst crimes in human history, but a civilization that prosecuted those crimes on the principle that no man is above the law, that civilization must also ask whether its own executions were lawful and humane. The Army's denial in the face of photographic evidence and eyewitness testimony suggests they already knew the answer. October 16, 1946. The night before, Keitel spoke to prison chaplain Henry F. Gericke. "You have helped me more than you know," he said. "May Christ, my Savior, stand by me all the way. I shall need him so much." He received communion. At 1:11 in the morning, he walked into the gymnasium. He climbed the steps. He stood beneath the noose and spoke his final words. "I call on God Almighty to have mercy on the German people. More than 2 million German soldiers went to their death for the fatherland before me. I follow now my sons, all for Germany." The trapdoor opened. He fell. The drop was insufficient to snap his neck. The trapdoor struck his head as he fell through, cutting his face. He did not die. He hung there, strangling, convulsing, for 24 minutes before death finally arrived. He was 64 years old. His body was cremated. His ashes were scattered into the river Isar. There were no tears shed for Wilhelm Keitel. Wilhelm Keitel was not a man who lacked intelligence. He was not a man who didn't understand what he was signing. He was a man who made a choice, repeatedly, across more than a decade, to place loyalty, career, and comfort above every moral instinct he possessed. He called it duty. The tribunal called it what it was. And yet, a journalist who covers this story honestly must also sit with a final uncomfortable question. The civilization that punished Keitel for crimes committed outside the law, did it in that gymnasium also step outside the law? The army said no. The photographs said otherwise. History is rarely clean. Justice, even when deserved, is rarely simple. Wilhelm Keitel signed the orders. He signed the surrender. And in the end, he paid for both in one of the most agonizing executions in the history of the Nuremberg trials. If this video gave you something, subscribe to Darkroom Archive, share it with someone who takes history seriously, and drop a comment. Do you think what happened in that gymnasium was justice? Or did it become something else? I'll see you in the next video. Until then, remember, history never forgets, and neither should we.